Good afternoon. We're making great progress into our exploration of Star Trek Adventures role-playing game, a 2x20 system game for Modiphius. It's what some folks might call a story game, in that it really cares about and implements in the mechanical layer of the gameplay things that have to do with the genre, with how things happen on TV and how characters really are invested in what they're doing. Now, you may be used to, in most other role-playing games, your character sheet looking a little bit like this. You've got your statistics down here at the bottom, you've got your skills right here, you've got a little bit of fluff right here, and then maybe, something about your race and your class. Well, this game, Star Trek Adventures, has one further layer that describes who your character is, what they believe in. It's called their values. And those values are the fuel for determination, which is the most potent instrument that your characters will have in play to make sure that they come out alive and that the mission is something which is not left behind along the way. They are Starfleet's brightest and best. But why? And what makes them get up every day in the morning, and what causes them to dig their nails in and hang on for dear life when the going gets tough? I'm the Complex Games apologist. Why don't you replicate your favorite beverage? And we're going to talk about values and determination in Star Trek Adventures. Other than the very superficial dimensions of Chief O'Brien being enlisted and Geordi LaForge being an officer, of the color of their skin, of their age, that one is a family man and the other is not, how do we know the difference between them, really? What are stories about Chief that make them different than stories about Geordi? Well, that's what values can answer for us. In Star Trek Adventures, each character has 4 values. They might come into conflict with one another. Some values might help them in some situations, and other values, they might hinder them. And it's that tug of war, the sort of thing that we experience in our own daily lives, between work and family, between country and faith, that really makes us into who we are. In the book, it says that a value is no mere statement of opinion. It is the kind of the driving force that explains why this character has the morals, the preferences, and why they are the person that they are. Now, this can be very challenging to kind of write down in the little one-sentence forms that this game asks us to create. But it's very rewarding to see in play, and the way that it's implemented, the reasons that you will have to need determination, and how determination will get onto the field, are really fun. So let's first talk about what determination is and how it can help you in the adventure. And then we'll talk about how values can give you determination and how your values can change over time. A character begins each mission with one point of determination. And when one of their values would help them in a situation, when it would be called upon, and when it would fuel them in the endeavor, they can spend that point of determination to get some big benefits. Now let's consider a value. A starship is a home, its crew a family. This is a value held by the security chief in one of my games of Star Trek Adventures. Now imagine that there's a hull breach on Deck 6. Flames are ravaging through the corridors, and several of the young cadets and crewmen that this security chief has brought up and kind of seen through into the very beginnings of their career in Starfleet, some of those kids are likely to perish on Deck 6 if this situation is not brought under control. The security chief goes to Deck 6 through the turbolift. He summons a damage control team from his subordinates in the security department, and they get to work putting out those fires, rescuing those young officers and crewmen, repairing that hull breach. It's a perilous endeavor, but these are people that he looks at as his family, and this starship and its survival is on the line. It's his home. He spends that point of determination. Now, what can it do for him? Recall in the Momentum and Threat video, create opportunity was one of the most common spends that you would be using your momentum on. Well, you can spend your determination to get an even bigger boost. It's like buying an extra die under the Create Opportunity spend, but we assume that that die has already rolled a 1, which will grant you 2 successes on the roll. Now it does count as a purchase die, so if you're also spending momentum, those other dice will have the higher prices. So say if we spent a determination for the first die, then the second die would cost 2, and the third die would still cost 3. This is a little bit of a more esoteric part of the rules, but it's something that I see comes up often, and so I thought I'd point it out very early on in the video. Those guaranteed 2 successes on a die roll can be absolutely crucial if it's a do or die type of situation. This guy right here, Chief O'Brien, has a lot of those come up when he needs to beam up his friends from perilous situations on planetary surfaces. Now, if you would have passed the check anyway from your base 2d20 or from whatever dice otherwise that you purchased, those 2 ones that you just rolled will still go back into the momentum pool. But what's more, this can allow you to access higher difficulties of tasks that would otherwise be impossible. If it's a do or die situation, if you must absolutely hit that girdered bridge that is hanging over a monster which is about to consume one of your fellow officers, well, spending a point of determination could be what brings that bridge down onto the back of that monster, pinning it and letting your companion escape. Another way that you can spend a point of determination in those kinds of do or die situations is to re-roll all the dice in your pool. In Star Trek Adventures, a re-roll means that you can keep some dice while re-rolling others. You can also spend your determination in a surge of activity. We've seen on a number of occasions when a character is just right in their element, when they are acting on instinct and intuition, while Geordi LaForge runs all over main engineering, keying in various sequences of commands, ordering his subordinates about, and what do you know? The Enterprise very quickly has a solution to something which was going to be its undoing. That's called a surge of activity, and it allows you to attempt 2 tasks in a crisis situation where you might only be able to take 1. This is especially important in conflicts, i.e. man-to-man combat and ship combat. Now, one thing about Will Riker is that he's versatile. He will go anywhere and do anything because he knows he can pick it up in the moment. Make it so is a way that you can spend your determination to gain an advantage in play. I keep hearkening back to the idea that you need to prove to Klingons that you're a worthy opponent, that you are to be treated as a warrior rather than a non-combatant. Well, when Will Riker enters into the exchange program with Starfleet and the Klingon Empire, and he ends up being a first officer to a Klingon captain, that determination spend is a way that he can get access to that kind of respect before the scene gets too far along. And finally, determination can be spent to ignore the effects of an injury during a scene. Sure, your arm might have a phaser burn on it, but there is more on the line, and there are things more important to you than your bodily safety. That's a really good way to spend your determination as well. In other words, when things are on the line, and your credo, your inner values as a Starfleet officer are being called upon, that's when determination is useful. And it also happens to be when you need it. Up until now, we've been talking about the situations where your values are fueling determination spends. But your values can also be a hindrance. They can be something which can come into conflict with the mission, make things more difficult. When your value would be a hindrance, when it would make things harder, well, then that value is challenged. You cross it out on your character sheet, and you sort of accept that this situation is harder because of that. Now, Worf's kind of true Klingon warrior ethos, which is somewhere in his values, is one thing that really ties a knot in things. Another is Catherine Janeway's insatiable curiosity. She wants to describe spatial phenomena and kind of get a glimpse of this whole other side of the galaxy that no one's ever seen before in Starfleet. but she also knows that she's got a grim mission to try and get her crew home. Those two will come into conflict. When a value is challenged like that, you cross it out on your character sheet with a line through it. And at the end of the mission, you get a chance to rewrite that value. And you can also have a determination spend happening at the same time. The example that we get in the book is of Jonathan Archer's two values of angry at the Zindi and seek out new life and new civilizations. He has to pick between the two of them when he meets a Zindi arboreal for the first time. And which one does he choose? Well, the one that's the more Starfleet way. And he might have to come to terms with his anger as time goes on, and that's how that value will evolve. He gets a determination in that moment, and he spends it in that same moment. But you can also challenge values outside of that kind of situation, just by themselves. Now, a special way that the Game Master can get involved in you earning back determination points is to test your values. The Game Master can suggest a complication based on one of your values and give you a determination point. As you accept that point of determination, you also accept the complication. It's up to you to accept or turn down this offer, and it'll often be at the start of a scene. This is how the rules of the game suggest more severe limitations be placed upon characters because of their values. Some examples of this are Lieutenant Worf when he refuses to give blood for a Romulan prisoner, and that prisoner then dies. And also, when Lieutenant Worf refuses to have any kind of treatment done when he incurs a spinal injury. These are the sorts of things that will take time to negotiate between the player and the Game Master, possibly. Or you could have such a good relationship that they could happen spontaneously on the fly. But I say that the best way to handle this sort of testing value situation is at the start of a scene. That way, you can really get into character, your new character that might have this complication that they have to work inside of. It's a really interesting role-playing circumstance and a way that this system leans in to what these characters are. Real people. Now that mode of challenging values, where you cross it out on the character sheet because it's a hindrance to the situation, well, that's the sort of thing that you can only do once per mission. It's enshrined in the rules that you've kind of got to pick your moment so that that sort of thing doesn't get too gamey, and so that also the value that is challenging you really gets some screen time, so that you think about it and it really gets visited in a way that the Game Master and the players and you can learn about what's really going on inside this character's head. It's fuel for role-playing and for determination. The two go together. So not only are your values not static, because you'll get these abundant opportunities to rewrite them, but you also, through the use of milestones, which are sort of like experience points or places to change things about your character, get the opportunity to change values around. You can even gain more of them as your character evolves, which can give you more of those opportunities where values will come into contact with one another and conflict. Now there's a special kind of value that isn't on your character sheet at all, called directives. The prime directive, don't interfere with the natural development of a species. Well, that's always in play. That's the sort of thing that is the Starfleet way. It can be interpreted, of course, in a lot of different ways, depending on which show we're watching today. And then there are mission-specific directives, or possibly directives that have to do with the sort of show or ship that you're on. Voyager is suggested as having a standing directive of getting home, and any time that they have to turn away from that, or they might need to linger someplace to make sure that things work out right for their new allies or companions, well, then that directive is getting challenged by what's going on in the game. Now, when you challenge a directive in play, Starfleet is not about to rewrite its rules and regulations for you. It's the sort of thing that will be going down on your permanent record. Someday we'll be talking about the reputation mechanic. It's a way that you can visit how well your character is fitting into the Starfleet career at the end of missions. It's a fun and robust mechanic to figure out if your character's up for a promotion and how they're regarded by the rest of Starfleet beyond your crew. It goes without saying that values are the most interesting part of character creation. The rulebook says that they are the most creative place that your character will come to life, and I couldn't agree more. Even if you copy and paste the values on your character sheet straight out of the rulebook, which you can go much further than that if you choose to, you'll have a unique combination of values. The sort of things that will make someone into a real individual with pushes and pulls. It can be difficult to come up with these values, and the rulebook admits as much, but it also provides a robust character creation system in the person of the life path mechanic. You get to find out where in the Star Trek universe your character was born, and how you came to become a Starfleet officer. The different things you picked up along the way will tell you what your values are. So for now, I'm going to leave you with the 4 characters from my own first game of Star Trek Adventures. We've only finished a 3-session premiere episode, but I feel like I've gotten to know these people a little bit. I've gotten to understand what makes them into characters that we would see on the small screen of television. And I think that when you crack open the rulebook and create a character for yourself, you'll also get someone that is both your own and someone that we would take heart to see on the small screen, bringing Star Trek to life. So there you have it, folks. Values and determination is sort of the last piece of the puzzle before we get into some real nitty-gritty stuff with the more interesting and detailed parts of the rules. Up on the horizon is the extended task system, a way to bring to life the sort of really involved and difficult problems that can really make or break an episode. They are the sort of things that characters will lean into and have to make multiple tasks to complete. It's sort of a lot like a job with hit points if you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, but I think it's a little bit more interesting than that. And still to come, we will visit the man-to-man combat system, which is exciting and fast-paced, as well as the very robust Starship Bridge mechanics, which also include, of course, ship-to-ship combat. There's a lot to Star Trek Adventures to take in, and once we're done talking about the rules, I'd love to talk to you about my creative process, about the campaigns that I'm running, and about how to create new things for this game. I look forward to the journey with you throughout this autumn. For now, I'm the Complex Games Apologist. Happy gaming.